I honestly don't understand. I don't understand why it's controversial to anybody to decide that you're going to stand with Israel in this situation. I honestly don't understand why it's controversial to say we need a secure border.
Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagan, and we are back here for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of the Gold Standard and Iowa Conservative Podcast. I got John Hendrickson and myself, and we have a lot of new and fun content for you today. John, if you're on video, and you really should be on the video because that's really where it's at, you can already get a preview of what John wants to talk about today. But, John, did you know who that was at the outset?
Was that Fetterman?
That was Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman. Irritating the far left on what I believe is a fairly conventional position on Israel and the border. But I thought you might at least appreciate that a little bit. We don't do a cold open around here that often, but kind of threw you for a loop. But I clearly Senator Fetterman is. I don't think those are conservative positions necessarily.
No,
and I think they're probably majority positions in the state of Pennsylvania.
Yes,
if I had to guess, but
I mean they're really common sense positions, and it's just surprising to see Fetterman coming out and saying these things.
Yeah. So I don't need to go down the path too far, but I brought that up because I think it was yesterday we saw the United States Supreme Court rule on a border decision where the Border Patrol is actually cutting down razor wire put up by the state of Texas to prevent the ongoing massive influx of illegal immigrants. So that was an interesting decision. I'm sure you saw that.
Yes,
I don't know how deep you went into that.
I just saw the headline, so I didn't read the opinion.
And I think if you are concerned about border security, which I know both of us are, and I think that if you were an incumbent president running for re-election, you'd be concerned about that, but apparently not. But when you read a news article about a Supreme Court decision, the issue is usually a little bit more complicated than what you read in the headline for sure. But certainly there is a real issue here constitutionally that may or may not have been completely litigated in this case. But, we focus on state level policy, and I think there is a states' rights federalism angle that certainly runs through this is how much authority does the state of Texas have to secure its southern border?
Yes, yeah.
And they feel like, Governor Abbott feels like, and I know Governor Reynolds agrees, having sent the National Guard down there, that that is not being adequately protected.
Yeah.
And so there's a real tension here between the states and the federal government that I think extends beyond just the simple issue of whether or not the border is secure and who's responsible for it, but the actual issue of states' rights. So,
absolutely, yeah.
It's something that I think you and I probably will spend some more time on going forward, but mainly I just wanted to play Fetterman clips because I get a kick out of it sometimes.
Yeah.
So. Okay, before we go a lot further, so one thing that we, John, I joked about doing this with you yesterday, and I'm going to actually do it today. So it is time for your annual podcast review.
Yes.
So this is the time every year we bring you in and we sit you down and we talk about whether or not you've met your goals and talk about what lies ahead for you next year. So I've gone back and gone back through some old episodes and it's really a data-driven analysis of the last year. And that we think that things are heading the right direction for you as a part of the ITR Live podcast.
Well, that's good. So
and we look forward to you. We think that all of your goals have been met for the year. The listeners have. And I think to be a serious, I did actually zero preparation for that bit, and I didn't look at any data. But I do know that the listeners have really appreciated your contributions over the last year. Now, one of the goals that we have, though, because that's what we're here for, is going forward, is what sorts of new things can you bring to the podcast? We've explored, early 20th century presidential politics.
Yeah.
But you're one of the things that I think you'd like to do is step up sort of the visual part of that. So you have some new things. We've done this in the past, but you've got some new memorabilia that you've recently got, and you want to share those with the folks. So this is that time, John, as part of you looking ahead to the year ahead and how you're going to do more for our listeners. Hold it up to the one down there at the end. Yeah.
So this is a really unique piece that I just got the other day. Actually, it's from Ohio, and Robert A. Taft, who was the son of President William Howard Taft. And this was actually, I thought it was originally from his presidential campaign, but it's actually from one of his Senate campaigns. So I'm guessing it was probably sometime in the 1940s, possibly late 1930s when this came. But it's a neat Republican elephant, says Taft. Taft is one of my favorites because he was sort of the leader of the conservative Republicans in the late 30s into the early 1950s, and he died young, unfortunately, of cancer. But he was nicknamed Mr. Republican, and he sort of was an America First style conservative.
Yeah. So the question I asked when I saw this yesterday that I don't think anyone gave me a good answer on, maybe I didn't like it, is that's sort of in a clear plastic container.
Mm-hmm.
Can we turn that into a decal or a cling, and put that in the back of your pickup?
I think so.
Like the back window could be your Taft.
Your
Taft sign,
because there is a string there that you can hang this poster from.
Oh, that'd be great. Some people, they put their, Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes peeing on something or whatever. No. But no, John's going to have his 1930s Taft elephant sign in the back of his F-150. So.
That's right.
All right. Okay, what else you got, John?
And this is a piece I got a couple weeks ago, and it's kind of a unique piece.
Use the handle, John. You're stressing me out.
It's I originally thought this was from the 1932 campaign. It's a Toby jug, and it's of Herbert Hoover.
Nice.
And it's actually from the 1928 presidential campaign because I found they made one of his opponent, Democrat Al Smith, Alcohol Al of New York, and so and they nicknamed him that because he wanted to repeal prohibition. But so they made these Toby mugs, I believe they're called, these patriotic products, and there's actually one of these on display in the Hoover Presidential Library.
I thought it looked familiar.
Yeah, and so
now you have your own.
Yeah, this is a good piece for my.
Have you
collection.
Have you had coffee out of it yet?
No, I haven't. No, no. But it's kind of a neat piece, and I should have brought the Al Smith one in too as well because I now I have the pair from the 28.
That is fantastic, John. Well, we want you to continue to bring this stuff in because, all joking aside, John, you have a truly impressive collection of political memorabilia. Obviously, there's a lot of it from that era that you have done a lot of study on, but you have other great stuff too. I know you've got some really great Civil War era things, and I think this is all a very subversive way to try and get people onto the YouTube, onto the video or Rumble, if I remember to upload it there. But so you can kind of see this stuff, and it's really cool stuff. I love having it. You bring it in the office, and we enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I'm slowly building the collection, and it's been fun. The only thing I worry about is what am I going to do with it? Because my brother doesn't want it, and
I'll have that won't be your problem.
That's right. Yeah.
Someday, but what we do want to do is find a way to display it all.
Yeah,
and that's something that we're giving thought to around here. So
I should have brought in the Christmas card that I showed you during pre-production yesterday from 1918.
Oh yeah, that was a treat.
It was a Christmas card dealing with Herbert Hoover and how people Hooverized during World War I, and so it was kind of a fun little artifact.
And Hooverized would mean to do what?
Yeah, and so during World War I, people rationed, and so you had meatless Mondays and wheatless.
So to Hooverize would mean to do without.
Yeah, to do without. Okay. And so you sacrificed, and you didn't use as much flour maybe as you wanted to, or you skipped a day without meat. And
so would it be fair to say that if we had a podcast episode that I didn't have a lot of really hard substantial state level taxation issues to talk about that I would hooverize the podcast
we are
by having you talk about your memorabilia
That's right,
for a while.
Yeah, we are hooverizing the podcast.
Okay. Good. Well, all right. Let's. I do have a few things I want to talk about. Today is the New Hampshire primary.
Yes,
I believe as we record this on Tuesday morning, we've already got Dixville Notch results, which
all 6 votes.
All 6 votes for Nikki Haley.
Yeah,
correct.
That's right.
Is Nikki Haley going to win New Hampshire?
I don't know.
She kind of has to, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Or at least get really close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if she gets really close, she'll stay in. But I think if it's a landslide for President Trump, I think it's over.
Yeah.
Because it even in South Carolina, she's very down in the polls, and so. But I read an article this morning in the Wall Street Journal, and I forget who wrote it, but basically arguing that Haley should continue because she should start appealing to independent voters to try to stop Donald Trump in some states like Georgia, for example, and that hoping there would be enough people cross over to block the nomination.
I would like to know who wrote that as well, because, well, anyway. Whenever you think about anybody in this race, trying to win a Republican nomination on the backs of Democrat and independent voters does not seem to me to be a tactically prudent idea.
Yeah, I agree.
You might get some people to cross, so you might even get a fair number of people to cross over. But at the end of the day, Republicans will select the Republican nominee.
Yes, yeah.
And that's from anything from, courthouse to the White House.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I agree with that. It sure does feel like this has continued to snowball after Iowa for President Trump, who had a big win on his own. But Governor DeSantis has dropped out and subsequently endorsed President Trump. There have been others. I think most of those endorsements seem to be going the direction of Donald Trump.
There was I didn't see the rally last night, but I saw an article about it where President Trump held a rally in New Hampshire last night, and it sort of was a unity rally, and it had Governor Doug Burgum, Senator Tim
Burgum
Scott,
being another one, who also announced he's not running for re-election.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I did see that. Vivek Ramaswamy was there, and so sort of showing that there was a unified element behind Trump. And
I saw I think it was in Politico. When you see a headline that asks, "Is the race over?" Those are the kinds of things where you really feel like, the simple fact that mainstream media is asking that question probably indicates that it is. But we'll see.
Yeah, I saw an interview this morning. I don't think it was from this morning, but maybe yesterday. But it was ABC News interviewing Ohio Senator J.D. Vance,
who's on the short list now.
Yes, yeah.
And I wanted to mention that, but go ahead.
I'm a big fan of Vance, and but anyways, ABC News was just drilling him about Trump and the primary, and basically the reporters that were interviewing him from ABC News, all they wanted to talk about was January 6th, and they kept using the word insurrection over and over again, and finally, J.D. Vance just really put him down, basically, got after him, and I'm glad he did, because it was just how they conducted that interview was just awful.
Right.
I mean, the blatant bias and.
Well, it's the same sort of bias that leads you to think that it is horrible to put razor wire on the southern border to stop an invasion, but it's okay to put razor wire around the United States Capitol.
Yes, yeah.
But J.D. Vance, I saw an article talking about VP possibilities for Donald Trump. Elise Stefanik was on that list.
Yes.
Tim Scott.
Kristi
Noem, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. That seems to be sort of the list. I don't know if I put odds on it at this point. The article seemed to think that Trump was really liked what Elise Stefanik did on what was it? One of these congressional investigations
into the higher ed.
Yeah, that's right. With the Harvard, with the Ivy League. I don't know. We'll see. I don't want to make too much out of vice presidential picks because I think at the end of the day they don't really matter.
Yeah.
Except maybe in this case because 4 years from now, President Trump can only constitutionally serve one more term, and so his vice president would certainly have a big leg up on who would be the nominee in 2028. So we'll see on that. Looking ahead to the general election a little bit, I saw a headline from our folks at AEI, American Enterprise Institute. John, I know you're a fan.
Yeah.
I actually like a lot of their content. But here's the question. Could immigration hand the election to Trump? Yeah. I mean, the public opinion polling on this, plus what's happening in our major cities with prominent Democrats turning on the administration. Yeah. I think it probably could.
There's that one book I read, and I can't remember the title now, but something like "Where Have the Democrats Gone?" It was by John Judas.
Oh,
and I can't remember the other author, but he might have been affiliated with AEI. But they made the similar concern is that immigration is such a huge issue, is such a huge concern with voters that it's going in Republican favor right now.
Absolutely. Well,
and rightly so.
And the immigration issue, probably. Well, I don't even think probably. I think there's plenty of data that would say that President Trump won in 2016 because of immigration.
Yes. Yeah.
That and the massive unpopularity of Hillary Clinton. Those two things together, but it is an issue that moves voters. There's no question about it. And I think our institutions really don't want to see that issue litigated, that it's somehow out of bounds or xenophobic to even talk about. But candidates that talk about immigration and have strong positions on that do well.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, wow, we've been all over the place here, John. A couple, the legislative session continues here in Iowa.
Yeah.
It's actually been pretty slow. Would you?
It has, yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, there was this morning some interesting bills were put out, but it's kind of been a slow start. I would agree.
I have always, especially the years that the caucuses happen, always seemed like very slow starts. Because the first week is almost always lost because you've got all the speeches and the organization and everything. But then you come right around in that second week is usually Martin Luther King federal holiday, so they don't come in on that day. And then even if it's not a presidential caucus, your local caucuses, legislators want to be back in their districts for that. And so that second week even is shortened or truncated or whatever. Yeah. But and so now we're into the first full week. Throw on top of all of that snowstorms, which slow everything down. And so I think this is the first real full normal schedule week. So I expect to see a lot of activity, but there haven't been, I guess, as many really big bills this year as we've seen in years past.
It seems like the focus right now is on the AEA bill. That seems to be the big one right now.
And I think that is a work in progress. I think there's revisions. The governor's office is working on that. It's something that we're looking at. I know, John, you and I have talked about that, and I want to talk to Sarah Curry about it too. But there is a property tax savings in that bill.
Yes, yeah.
And the mechanics of how all the dollars flow through the AEAs. And what kind of a property tax savings is that? Is that cutting off something where you're actually ending a tax, or is it shifting something? And so we want to make sure that we understand that better. But I suspect there'll be multiple iterations of that bill as it works through the process. I saw there's a subcommittee today on a bill to create a statutory definition for statutory construction on what is a woman.
Oh, really?
So that actually might be a fun subcommittee. I imagine there'll be some fireworks at that one.
Isn't it amazing that we've come this far in our society that we have to actually have a debate on what that means to be a woman or a man? That's just incredible.
That's the Matt Walsh question. What is a woman? It's, is the Iowa Code vague on that question? Yeah. Because the left can't answer it. So I don't know. Maybe our courts need some guidance on how to answer.
Well, remember that? Who was that? Was it the? And this is terrible, but I can't remember her name. But the woman that President Biden recently appointed to the Supreme Court. Didn't they ask her in a hearing about if she could identify?
She kind of struggled with it. She did better than some do on that.
Yeah. But it's just it's very troubling.
Yeah. And still, apart from all that, now here, 20 minutes into our episode, there is still some tax policy being discussed at the Capitol this year, and so we're watching that. Not a lot of movement on that. I don't expect that bill to cross the finish line real soon, but I think we'll still see some proposals, certainly from Dan Dawson in the Senate, maybe something a little different from Ways and Means Chair Bobby Kaufman in the House. We'll see, but I don't think that's on the back burner at all. Ways and Means operates on its own sort of schedule.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're tracking all those things. There's some other issues. There was a regulatory sandbox bill. Offered in the Iowa. So, and we don't need to go into the details and all that, but, sometimes just because there isn't movement on a tax bill or we've gone a week without a major conservative reform doesn't mean that some of these things aren't still out there and floating through the system. So, hopefully we can start tracking those as they move this week and come back with.
And there was some interesting bills, and I would have to go back and look at who the sponsors were, and they're not issues generally that we as an organization follow, but they're dealing with improving civic education in Iowa, which I, just have a personal interest in from, strengthening the understanding of history and government. And I think those are important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, John, that's all I had.
Yeah. Could I mention just one more thing?
Absolutely.
This morning, and this again isn't necessarily an ITR issue, but I think it's something important, but this morning.
Neither is the statutory definition of a woman. By the way.
That's right, but it impacts everything. And this was an article this morning from Iowa Public Radio News Morning Edition program. It says the headline of the article: more Midwest states are moving to block foreign ownership of farmland in 2024. And of course, we know that the governor in her condition the state address, I thought, outlined a pretty good proposal to make foreign ownership, specifically regarding communist China, having it more transparent. And Iowa has some of the best laws on that already. And so that's one issue I'm following. But there's 21 states that are looking at similar legislation. And the other thing, what made me concerned about this is this was from Fox News last week, and United States Government Accountability Office (GAO) report basically said the Biden administration is failing to properly track foreign ownership of U.S. farmland and doesn't appear to have a plan to begin tracking that data. And Congressman Dan Newhouse, Republican Washington, who chairs the Congressional Western Caucus, says, and I quote, "This report confirms one of our worst fears, that not only is the USDA unable to answer the question of who owns what land and where, but that there is no plan by the department to internally reverse this dangerous flaw that affects our supply chain and economy." And so I just think what Governor Reynolds is doing is just excellent in this area. And so I look forward to seeing that legislation come out, because I think this is such an important issue, not just for Iowa, but for national security as well.
Well, that is a fantastic way of bringing the podcast full circle. Because we started out about states having to act and remedy inaction by the federal government.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And this is not... these issues are serious, legitimate, and are not going away. And they're important to the American people, whether it goes from border security to foreign ownership of land, and they deal directly with our national security. And you're the historian here, but that seems to me like a recipe for, there's a catalyst for some change in the status quo there, because that can't continue.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe that's fixed by an election, but maybe not. And what do you do? Some of these things are specifically guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution.
Yes.
The U.S. Constitution says the federal government shall defend the borders from invasion.
Yeah.
What happens when they don't?
That's right.
And I'm not saying that this rises necessarily to that same level, but if the federal government won't do a necessary thing to protect the states will act.
That's right.
And it goes back to that point that I think certainly too many in Washington, D.C. have forgotten. And I think too many state legislators have forgotten, is that the states are sovereign here.
Yes.
And the states have the political power should they choose to exercise it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, exercising it against the federal government, it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, we'll see. But I think we're heading that way.
Yeah.
Just in how history's unfolding.
Yeah.
About the fabric of our republic.
I think you're absolutely right.
And frankly, it's frightening.
It is. Yeah.
I would rather not. I would rather have the federal government doing its job.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, anyway.
And it's governors like Abbott and Reynolds and others are being forced to act.
Yeah.
And because the incompetence and or complete failure of the federal government.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure that I would chalk it all up to incompetence, John. I think it's often willful.
Yeah, I agree.
So anyway,
I was trying to be generous.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
but you're absolutely right.
We as lawyers, we try to get the intent element as accurate as possible.
Yeah.
So anyway,
and just one clothing thought to go back to our friend Taft and Hoover.
Yeah,
Taft actually got his start working for Herbert Hoover.
Oh,
and during World War I, and they were good friends. And Hoover actually backed Taft's candidacy for president in 1952. That was one of the fiercest Republican primaries between Dwight Eisenhower and Robert Taft.
That's right. We were talking about that.
It was a very bitter contest.
I thought you were going to tell me that Taft got his start on an Ohio podcast. But
oh, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway. Well, great. This is good stuff. So we're going to have more of this in the future, but that's all the time we got for today. John, thank you. And listeners, thank you. Appreciate it. Don't forget to share. Give us a good review. Give us a like. And with all of those things, we will see you next time on ITR Live.